You know that Keeley Companies is all about fostering the world-class culture through their incredible cultural pillars. Well, it was time to add a seventh cultural pillar, Keeley Green. Guided by the mission to raise the sustainability standards by which they design, build, operate, and live, Keeley Green is dedicated to using a holistic approach to leave a positive impact on our environment, create a future that is sustainable for generations to come. In the words of Rusty Keeley, we are just getting started. You can learn more about that just getting started mentality and all the work they do by visiting my friends at Keeley Companies online at KeeleyCompanies.com.
Welcome to the Live Inspired podcast with John O'Leary. John is the #1 national best-selling author of the book On Fire. He's a world-class inspirational speaker, and he's the host of the Live Inspired podcast. John interviews extraordinary individuals on their life story so that you can wake up from accidental living and more fully live your life story. Here's your host, John O'Leary.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to the Live Inspired podcast with John O'Leary. This episode you are about to step into is one of the most shocking episodes I've ever recorded. It's one of the most remarkable life stories I've ever heard. It's one of the most difficult things to live through that this guy experienced. And yet what came out of it is so life-giving and so worthy for you. So I'm so glad you're here. And at the end of our time together today, I know, my friends, you're going to be glad that you were here as well. So let me tell you about our guest. His name is Jake Haendel. His story is one of unimaginable adversity, resilience, and ultimately hope in action. He's a once thriving chef, and yet Jake's life took a devastating turn when he was diagnosed with a rare and a terminal condition. It's known as locked-in syndrome. What this means is Jake was left completely paralyzed in a coma. No one knew during this 10-month stand that he was able to see, feel, experience, think, dream, long, be sad, be hopeful the entire time. They thought he was completely cut off from the world. And yet Jake was there the entire time experiencing everything, fully aware and completely unable to move or communicate. Not able to move his eyes, not able to blink his eyelids, not able to move his fingertips, nothing. Doctors told his family that there was no way out. And yet Jake, over time, proved them wrong and slowly began to recapture his life. It's an amazing story. You're going to be so moved by this. Today, Jake shares how he survived those 10 months trapped inside of his own body, what he learned in that time, how it ultimately redeemed his life, and the extraordinary steps that led to this full recovery. He opens up about some of the darkest moments, the mental resilience it took to endure, and the sheer willpower that helped him reclaim his life. Family, friends, brothers and sisters, if you need a reminder that even in the most difficult times in your life, that hope is never lost, this conversation today is for you. You're going to leave this episode inspired to face the challenges in your journey with renewed strength, embrace each day with gratitude, and believe again not only in the power of the human spirit, but the truth that the best is yet to come. So buckle up, get ready to rock and roll. You, my friends, are in for a huge treat as I bring on my friend, and now yours. His name is Jake Haendel. Jake, welcome to Live Inspired with John O'Leary.
Thanks, John. It's awesome to be here, man.
I've been looking forward to this since we booked you, and I cannot wait for my parents, my wife, my kids, our online community around the world to hear your heart, hear your story, hear the struggle, and then hear this joyful hope that you have today. It's an amazing story. We'll walk through that story together, but before we do that, if I happen to meet you at Boston Logan Airport or some grocery store around town and I said, Jake, my name is John, tell me about you. When someone meets you for the first time and they say, tell me about you, how do you even respond to that these days?
Yeah, I get a little flustered because in my head, I'm like, oh boy, where do I even begin? This is a long, crazy story. So you met me at Logan. I would give you my 3-minute concise version because I know you have a flight to catch. I would be like, I'm Jake, grew up in Boston, used to be a head executive chef. As you can see, I have some accessibility challenges now, and I've been through something crazy. And I kind of start with my terminal diagnosis out of nowhere, how I walked into a hospital, 6 months to live, rapid decline, and then they told me how I would slip into a coma and then die, stage 4 of my disease. And then the part where I see people's eyes really explode is like, but the coma wasn't a coma. I lived through something called locked-in syndrome. Have you ever heard of that? And then they're like, no, what is that? And I'm like, that is a coma you're conscious through. So I had full sense of self. I know who I was. I could hear, I could think, but I can't signal. The only thing I had was involuntary vertical eye movements. And then they say, and how long was that? And I say 10 months. And then I lived 4 years in a variety of hospitals, slowly recovering to the point where I'm at now. That's normally what I would do in that 30 minutes.
Well, here's what I would do. I would then roll with you to a bar and either buy you a coffee or a beer and say, dude, I need more than 3 minutes. I want to hear the story. And that's what you and I get to do right now. I'm emotional thinking about it because it's such a bad nightmare. I think most of us don't even imagine having it. Like it's so unimaginable that we can't even fathom it. And we're going to fathom it together today. We're going to walk through this journey together today. And we're going to come out the other side of it better because of it today. So, Jake, my friend, thank you for making time. Let's go. You mentioned that when you were 28 or so, you were a chef, you were successful, life, you were on top of the world, but you also mentioned that you walked into an emergency room. You had some issues at that point. I want to talk about the things that led up to that. I've heard you say in the past that you were a fun loving, energetic, forward looking kid. Life was awesome when you were little. And you felt depleted, you felt anxiety, you felt empty on the inside. Talk to me about that little kid growing up.
Yeah, as I hear you say that, that's exactly how it was. I was this fun loving, outgoing, social, love to laugh, have a good time kid. But on the other coin, inside, I was stressed out. I grew up, there was a lot of sadness. I grew up with a lot of death in my family. I had a mother who was diagnosed with breast cancer and battled that for 10 years. And over that period of time, she ups and downs and really was looking like she would die 5 years before she actually did. And because of that, and having divorced parents and other family members who died, I just had this kind of grim view of the world, and I didn't want it to be that way. I am this like social, fun loving guy who just can't get enough of life and good times and wants to talk to people. But on the inside, I was freaking out. I was uncomfortable. Developed insomnia, very hard time sleeping, and a lot of anxiety and depression. So it was like two different people in a way.
And the same. I mean, both those things can exist at the same time. Like the
Yeah.
joyful, happy, cute, playful, social, fun loving kid, and the little guy who'd been around death, seen struggle, had a sick mom who died too young, who wrestled with anxiety and everything else that you had already internally. And these two things, man, are part of your story that are going to lead ultimately, I think, to this terrific, tragic, and redemptive story that we're about to walk into. So your mother passes away when you're 19.
Yeah, and let me back up real quick. So, leading up to that, the last 4 years, so when I was 15 or so, high school, because I couldn't sleep and because I loved my mom so much, I couldn't imagine being without her. I was so just overwhelmed and trying to do the right thing for her and be there for her, but also trying to like not be this wreck of a person. I kind of developed some bad habits. High school life, there's drinking and there's going out and stuff. And I took that to the extreme. And I started doing this alcohol and drugs, not really to have a good time, but to self medicate my unhappiness. Also, within these 4 years, I always knew my mom was going to pass away when I was younger and I was living with her. I was like, what am I going to do when my mom passes away? Because, like financially, where am I going to live? How am I going to take care of myself? And I was like, well, both my parents were chefs and I'm really good at that. Like, maybe I should do that for a career. So that's what led me down that career path. And there was already addiction. And then that industry is riddled with drugs and alcohol anyway, which just added, and it's a hard lifestyle too. So, like, all of that combined made this perfect storm for a highly functioning, addicted, depressed, anxious kid without a mom recipe.
And because it's like the two halves, man. And this kid who's energetic and joyful and playful and the life of the party still and rocking and rolling professionally, and a kid who found love, attracted it, multiplied it. I mean, you meet a girl named Ellen, you fall in love, you date, and she never knows, man, that you're as addicted and you're as struggling as deeply as you are. Talk even about hiding that addiction and hiding that struggle from people you love the most.
We're now into my 20s. I had a few relationships before my wife, Ellen, and some of them knew, some of them didn't. A lot of people in my life knew I was life of the party and liked to have a couple cocktails, but they didn't know the extent. They didn't know that I would duck off to the bathroom at a family event or whatever event it was and freebase some opiates off tinfoil because, believe it or not, it doesn't really smell. So nobody could like know. And it was like back to that Jake as a kid, inside feeling sad, but on the outside being the class clown. But they have no idea that I just like smoked some heroin. What was it like hiding that? I mean, it's weird because I am an honest guy and I want to be honest and real, but it was my deep, dark secret. Now, there were some people who knew what I was doing, but most people did not, right? And then in terms of my wife, I just remember her first date. She says, I really like you. Like, just answer one question for me. You don't do heroin, do you? Because heroin was pretty common around here in Massachusetts, Boston, Cape Cod. And in my head, I'm like, oh boy. And I'm actively trying to get like off this stuff. So I hadn't done it in like 48 hours. And I said to myself, I'm like, I really liked her. And I was like, if I answered truthfully, it's probably over. Now, if I just don't, I can give myself a chance, her a chance, and myself a chance to get clean and us a chance. And the way I answered was, well, why would you ask that? I mean, I've done it, but I don't do it, which was true because I was actively trying to get clean, but it was a lie.
Well, it's a lie that you continued to perpetrate while dating, while being engaged, and while ultimately saying I do to this woman and being married to her. And it's going to hit the fan here in a moment, man, because your lives, not just your life, but her life, and the people who loved you's lives changed profoundly. I think May 21st is the beginning of it, but it's just the start of it. May 21st, you're driving a vehicle. Tell me what happens.
May 21st, 2017. Also, in the week prior, I don't know anything's wrong, but my voice was just slightly higher pitched. And that day, May 21st, I wake up and my wife, she goes, what's wrong with your voice? Are you drunk? And I'm like, no, it's 7 a.m. I'm going to work. And I get out to the car and I just noticed I have one of those big swerves, like when a big 18-wheeler drives by you and it like the wind of it kind of sends your car and you're like, whoa. It was
Yes.
like that intense of a swerve. And I just remember saying to myself, like, what's wrong with you? And then I go like another 5 miles and I have another one. And there's no 18-wheeler or anything to make me do that other than me. I look in the rear view and I see some blue lights. And again, addicted, have drugs in the car, and having this lifestyle for 10 years. Not paranoid at all because I've been through this world. This moment when the cop comes up to me, that's the real moment I realized it was a disconnect from my brain to my body. And I wouldn't say I actually realized it. I just knew that I can't control my arms. So the window was down, and the cop is like, what's wrong with you? You're driving like a maniac, blah, blah. And all I can think of in my head is, I gotta find my wallet to give my license. And I'm like, I can't move my arm to do that. And where's my wallet? And I start making these erratic movements. I'm like reaching under my seat, and I'm still with it enough, even though in retrospect, I now realize what is happening. And he's like, sir, stop moving, stop moving. And that's when he took out his gun and he's like, sir, I will shoot you. Stop moving. And I can't do it. And then I hear him on the radio. It was like calling all cars situation. And I don't know, 10, 12 cruisers. They were like blocking off traffic and they swarmed the vehicle and they ripped me out. They take me to the station or whatever. And in processing, they handcuff one arm to like a pipe or something. And I'm just sitting there telling the guy my life story. I still didn't have, I don't know the word, the intuition or the smarts to be like, something's really wrong with your brain right now. But I remember being like, why are you telling these cops like secrets?
Right. Singing like a canary, man. And that singing's going to be softened here in a moment. They book you, they arrest you, they send you home, though, for now. And then, as bad as that is, like if the story is only about this addiction and this arrest and everything else they find, like, ooh, that's an ugly story. But where it's going to lead you is, in so many regards, even darker. So I think it's 3 days later, you're home, and your wife is trying to get you to like, man, wake up. What is wrong with you? And what is she noticing about you that ultimately encourages her to call 911?
My voice, my balance. I remember when I got released, walking down the road, dragging one foot behind me. Like it was a weird walk. I get home and she's obviously mad at me for getting arrested. And she's like, you need to go to the hospital. And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. And then I don't know what was the last thing that made her dial 911. I know for me, when she did it, I knew the paramedics were coming and I snuck off into the bathroom to get high or whatever. And my fingers, they could not do something, open this little baggie that I had done 20 times a day for the last decade. And that was one of the moments where like, there's really something wrong with me because I can't even do this. And then paramedics come, and I remember them saying, we think you're having a stroke. And I was just like, yeah, I don't think I'm having a stroke because it's been like a couple days, couple weeks. And in retrospect, I actually think it was 2 to 3 weeks of like micro subtle, like little things happening with my voice and movements. So they said the same thing in the emergency room. We think it's a stroke. I said the same thing. I don't think it's a stroke. And like 4 hours, 5 hours go by. And they're about to discharge me. Ellen walks in and she goes, wait, you cannot discharge him. This is not my husband. And she digs on my phone and she plays my voicemail. And that was a moment where they were like, oh, because my voice, that was this ER team's first time hearing, was not my own voice on my voicemail. And that's when they admit me and get me an emergency MRI.
It's leading to this inflection point where they finally recognize, no, it's not a stroke. It's something radically different and remarkably rare.
Yeah, I think at this juncture, they were more like, we have no idea what this is, but let's figure it out. That's what ultimately happens the next morning.
Explain what they diagnose you with, and then
Yeah.
because the most remarkable thing is, and there's nothing they can do. So, what's the diagnosis?
Get the emergency MRI, wake up, and a big team in the room, diagnosis. I remember they write it on this whiteboard. It's a lot of letters, 4 words: acute, toxic, progressive leukoencephalopathy. So now I know what all those words mean. At the time, I'm like, huh? And they were like acute, they broke it down, meaning it's happening right now. Toxic, thanks for being honest with us and about your addiction and habits, because we probably wouldn't have known otherwise by the MRI. Toxic in this case means something you inhaled. Progressive meaning it's only going to get worse. It's terminal. Leukoencephalopathy, it's a disease of the white matter of your brain. I just knew before they even said terminal that this was bad because I could just tell there were a lot of people in the room. I want to say between 8 and 12 white coats and a couple nurses, and just the looks alone.
Clearly, as bad as it is currently in this room, as you said, man, it's progressive. It's going to be worse tomorrow, and the following day will be worse yet. And there's no treatment. So instead of sending you upstairs, ultimately they send you home with palliative care. Like, good luck, Ellen. Here's your husband.
It was a little more complex than that. To walk me through what that would look like, essentially losing function week by week. They didn't send me home at that point. They kept me there for about a week, and they immediately sent me to a rehab. And I always thought that was interesting because it was like, why am I going to rehab? Isn't that for people who are getting better? And they were like, oh, this is to like prolong your abilities. Makes sense actually now that I've been through the ups and downs of it on both sides of the coin. So yeah, I go to Fairlawn Rehab, probably do 2, 3, 4 weeks there, just rapidly declining. And then I didn't qualify for there, so they sent me to a nursing home. From there, that's when I go home on home care therapy. I get visiting aides and stuff. And then by October, so from end of May to October, that's when I start to lose the ability to speak and I'm more bedboundish. And that's when I go into the neuro ICU stuff. And a little after that is palliative care.
Before you enter palliative care and before things get yet even worse, you feel yourself fading. You know how you're presenting and what you're trying to say, and then you're struggling being able to articulate those words. You know what you're trying to make your hands do, but they won't do what you want them to do. And every day is a little bit worse than the previous one. What's that like to be rapidly losing the ability to do what you want to do in your life? This isn't a slow fade. Like my sweet dad has Parkinson's disease, and over decades, this disease has robbed him of his ability to move in the ways he wants. For you, it's not a slow fade. It's almost instantaneous, man. You see it daily getting worse. What's that like knowing
Yeah.
it's getting worse?
Well, it's horrible. I guess being diagnosed with a terminal, like you got 6 months to live, quickly I came to peace with my life was kind of over and got to get over that and decide how you want to live your last days. And long story short, I decided I was going to do the best I can, try and fight this and be the best I can be for the people around me that I care about. And it turned to not just about me. The only part of that was about me, it's like, how can I be in the least amount of pain and the most comfortable? And everything else was like, let's make this pleasant for the people around me, or as pleasant as it can be. Because again, I'm somebody who watched their mom die and went through this, and she was really good at putting on a good face for me and my younger brother and people around her. And I thought about that while I was dying. Like, what would my mom Marjorie be doing right now? She'd crack a joke. She'd get up and do it. But back to your question, yeah, it was almost day by day, week by week. Everything was becoming super contracted, and like the fingers would curl and they started like stabbing into my palms. And then just like bodily function and stuff weren't working either. And I just had to like be bedbound, and I can still kind of talk and I could still kind of move my neck. I didn't even know this was like possible to happen to a human body so fast. I know how people use that term, like my life flashed before my eyes. Like it didn't really in that way, but you have this time when you're sitting around and you only got like a month left or 2 months left. And I thought about my childhood, growing up in areas like good times, bad times, areas I went wrong in, little things I said to maybe my mom or a parent or aunt or a cousin or a girlfriend that I was like totally in the wrong and out of line, or like really nice things I did. And you like think about these moments and
Like a life
uh,
review, man.
yeah, it's like a life review. And then there's the other coin too, where you think about what you could have done and what you wanted to do and where you are now. And your mind can take you a lot of crazy places when you're in that state doing that thing, which I would love to talk to other people who have been there and see if it's similar. But I know that's what I did for, I wouldn't say I did it like 24/7, but every day there was a chunk of time where I did that, as you called it, life review, but also life, what could have been
Yeah.
review.
It's like look
Uh,
both ways, like looking backward
yeah,
and
yeah, totally.
longingly looking forward to what could have been and probably should have been if different decisions had been made. And yet here you are in bed, losing the ability to do everything. In November, you're sent to hospital because now you can no longer even breathe. They put you on a trach. Then you lose the ability to move entirely, including the ability to use your eyes, to blink, to speak. You can't do anything.
Can't
And
do
some people are
anything.
saying you're brain dead, that you're there, but you're not there. You whispered this if folks were listening a little while ago, but I want you to roar it out a little bit more clearly now. You're in a coma, but you are fully aware.
Fully aware. I mean, I didn't know how I was perceived for a while. I knew, again, I'm fully cognitively with it, perhaps even sharper, because when you're in this state, you're hypersensitive to sound, to everything, and you're super aware of what's going on. Again, it's horrible. I'm thinking in my mind all these things. So I have sense of self. I can hear, I can think, I can see only in a positional eye gaze. So if I'm lying in the hospital bed, I see the ceiling and the fluorescent lights. If the nurse rolls me to the left, I'm doing a scan of if I'm being rolled over. And she holds me there, I can see there. Rolls me back, I see there. Nothing else. I can't blink. I mentioned I involuntary vertical eye movements, so my eyes would do whatever they wanted to do whenever they wanted to do. So they would flutter at times. They were open most of the time, which caused for some serious dry eye, let me tell you. And you can't even, for an eye drop, non-verbally or verbally, or signal you have an itch. It was unimaginable. And when you couple it with this insane chronic pain. Now, I have chronic pain as we speak. The pain levels I had then, you cannot even compare. And that's one thing that I think a lot of people that have heard my story before don't fully realize. Like the pain I was in was just so intense that the only thing that could shift me from focus on that intense pain was a different type of pain.
I want our listeners and our viewers to just imagine that for a day, that you are in bed, you are fully aware, completely, and maybe even more fully aware than you've ever been. And you can't move your arms, your legs, your eyelids, and no one around you knows that you're in there for the most part. No one really fully believes that you're anything other than in a vegetative state. You can't explain that this area itches, or that you're hot, or that your eyes are dry, or that you're thirsty, or that you're miserable or sad or lonely, or whatever the emotion is. It's all locked in. It's a great term for it. You're all locked in. And that's not just a day, but it's the following day that Jake experienced, and then the following day, and then the following day, and then the following week, and then the following month. And this goes on for more than 6 months. It's
Yeah.
unimaginable, Jake. Like I appreciate you walking us through it, man, but it's impossible for us to even imagine what that's like for anybody, in particular for you, man.
And I can't even believe I'm in a position where I can verbally or non-verbally talk about it. The fact that I'm able to articulate what that was like and that I'm alive and no longer terminal apparently is wild. In fact, that like this happened to me is still wild. So like I didn't know how I was perceived. I just knew that people in the hospital kind of stopped talking. They used to come in and be like, I'm here to do this, or like, good morning, blah, blah, blah. All that kind of stopped. And then I heard some nurses talking to each other and they used the term brain dead. And that's when I realized I was like, oh my God, they think I'm brain dead. I was like, wait, am I brain dead? And I'm like, how come I know like me in my childhood? Like I can see it and I have awareness of like where I am and I can talk to myself and do problem solving. And I'm like, I'm not brain dead. I know exactly what's happening. I'm like, oh man, I'm in trouble. I'm stuck here and they think I'm gone. And then I overheard them saying he won't make it past Christmas. And I was kind of looking forward to Christmas because this was, yeah, it wasn't it, not a state you even want to be in for an hour.
It's a state you're in not only for that hour, but for months. And it's a state you can't get out of. I mean, you can try to fall asleep, but then you wake back up. Like it's just this constant, persistent living hell that you find yourself trapped in this prison. It's it's wild, man. So in this state, what do you do to pass time?
Well, you talk to yourself. That's all you can do. I kept my sense of humor somehow. And like, not that I'd want to be in pain, but the severe pain definitely took my mind off a lot of boredom. Don't get me wrong, I was bored too and in panic. But the actual amount of time was 10 months of this state. And by month 4, once I realized survive past Christmas, I survived through the new year, I kind of came to a realization I might never die, but I might be stuck like this for as long as I have left, which might be 50 years. And that was really terrifying. Once I got through that, I started utilizing my time better.
I mean, part of this story is just like, wow, that's wild. But the reason you're on my podcast is not because it's a wild story, although clearly it is. It's that you use this time in purgatory to become better. You
Yeah.
use the worst to draw forward the very best of your life. Like that is, we all have that opportunity. And most of us shrug our shoulders, cross our arms, kick the dirt, and go back to our misery. You, my friend, in the worst of the worst, decided I'm going to start living differently now, no matter how long I have. Like, to me, that is remarkable. So you said you survived Christmas and New Year's, and you recognize, dude, it could be 50 years like this. So we might as well get busy living again. Talk about that, Jake.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said something very important. We all could make the choice to do it now, right? What I started to do is I started utilizing my time better to kind of go on this self therapy, self help retreat. And I zoomed out and looked at like where I went so wrong in life and what I could have done to, yes, I went through some trauma. Like, okay, how should you have dealt with that? And like, how should you go about living? And also, I had ups and downs, like a roller coaster of feeling positive that I would escape this locked in syndrome. Also, within the same hour, probably, of just kill me now, I can't take it. But throughout this self help retreat, I felt like I kept a good grip of time. So I would say a month or 2 months. I kind of came out of it more hopeful and optimistic. And if I get out and if I recover, this is how I'm going to live.
That if becomes the most unlikely win shortly in this story. Your stepfather is told that you're going to die, is my understanding, and comes in and kind of whispers, "Hey, it's okay. You fought the good fight. You can let go now." And I remember hearing you say, like, I'm not going anywhere, man. Like, what are you talking about? So he can't hear you say that, but your heart is telling you this. Your mind is now saying, that's right. We're not going to go anywhere. And then shortly after that, the doctor sees your wrist twitch ever so slightly.
Essentially, I was on home care hospice. I time out of hospice. You can only be on hospice for 6 months due to insurance typically. But I wasn't dying, but I wasn't getting better. They didn't know what to do with me. I get taken to a complex care unit of Mass General Hospital. And within a month and a half, 2 months, this one guy noticed on rounds, amazing man, doctor I attribute to really unlocking me, Dr. Stephen Levinson. I hear him say, you guys see that? He moves something. And again, I'm looking at the ceiling and I'm like, oh my God, oh my God. And I hear the other guys say, no, it's involuntary. Got his brain scan right here. That's impossible. And he goes, hey, I don't know if you can hear me, but if you can, do that again. And I'm like, oh boy, this is my one shot. Tense up my whole body. And I don't even know what I moved. And as I'm saying to myself, can't do it, I hear, wow, he's actually doing it. And I hear again cross chatter of how it's involuntary. And thankfully he goes, no, this is a change in medical status. I want somebody who specializes in nonverbal speech therapy to come in and teach him how to blink. And that's what started everything.
So there's a character here in part of your story who I look up to, man. It's your wife, Ellen. You held this secret away from her. You buried it quietly, but you continually abused drugs. It eventually stole your health. It split this two apart. It caused this episode. And yet, throughout this time in hospital, she kept coming back. She kept encouraging you when others said you could not feel. She took your hand. When others said you could not hear, she used her voice. She advocated for you. When others suggested they withdraw all treatment, she said, no, this is my husband. We're going to keep fighting forward. Talk about Ellen and how she championed for you when you couldn't champion for yourself.
Ellen, she was definitely a strong, strong advocate, and I attribute my survival and recovery to her. And I attribute my survival because of the love I had for her. I was fighting so hard to get back to some normalcy of life because I knew this is not how certainly saw my life going. I know she certainly didn't see being a caregiver at the age of 27. And the fact that she decided to stay, there's a lot more coming in my podcast about all this, but I told her to not stay. In fact, she was mad at me. And I said, I watched my mom die. It's not good. You shouldn't stay. And She did. I still have a lot of love for her. There will be a lot of big reveals and a lot to come on that subject.
I'm not going to probe anymore there other than to say it's so easy to give up on people. She stayed by your side during that time, and I remain so impressed by that. And when you, my friend, started moving that wrist and then blinking those eyes and shifting more, like what was it like for you after almost a full year of being completely locked in to finally be heard? What's that like the very first time that you can not only move a wrist and say, yeah, I am in here, but actually through blinking and using your eyes, say something that you've been wanting to say for a long time?
I mean, I take it back to the first time I heard the term brain dead. And that was another reason that I wanted, aside from wanting to survive, that was another reason. Right after I heard that, I was like, I know where I am. There's probably 20 patients in quote unquote comas. Are they all thinking like I'm thinking? I gotta let somebody know, because do they not know? So aside from wanting to get back to, for me, for my wife, for my family, that was another big reason I want to let people know that now I know the term brain dead was the derogatory kind of word to describe someone that's disconnected from all reality or whatever. But there's a lot of people withdrawing life support because they think there's no hope, but they might be inside screaming. So it's like important. Let's figure this out. I got to let them know. And what was that like after 10 months? Yeah, to be non-verbally heard was, it really was a miracle. I could have only hoped. And in that therapeutic retreat during hospice I took with myself, I didn't even see that outcome. I didn't see it unfolding. I fast forwarded and saw where I'm at now and saw having a picnic on the beach. I didn't see the 4 years of hard work, 5 years of hard work, but unimaginable to have that moment and definitely a miracle. And they told me how to blink and they introduced me over 3 4 weeks to a letter board. So I had a two-tone system. A blink means no, sticking out my tongue like a sick dog because it's all I could do was yes. And get the letter board took 10 minutes and I spelled out. And they're all in the room. Not that I can see them all, I could just hear how many feet were in the room. And I spelled out, I can hear you. It was pretty incredible. And I don't know if this is part of the human condition. We always want more. So again, this is something very basic. I can now spell it where it's like itch, pain. I quickly realized, although this is great and a miracle and a gift, took me 2 minutes to spell out itch. Then they'd be like, where is the itch? By the time I spell out back of arm, it has now traveled to back of center back. So that's what kept me breaking through to the next level, the next communication device, becoming unparalyzed. Not that it was my choice, but I tried hard in my therapy, even though I didn't have much at that time. And then it was like, okay, like that's great that I can do this, but now I want to learn how to do that. We always want more and more and more.
In a foxhole, many people will turn toward God or faith or prayer, reflection, and many people will turn completely away from it. And I'm curious, most foxhole battles take place over just minutes, hours, maybe a tour. Yours went on for 10 months, and as you alluded to, now 5 years. As you look at your journey, what role has faith played in one way or another in your recovery?
Younger, I was never super religious. There was definitely religion around me. And then I definitely turned away from any of that. Like when I heard the word God, I'd be like, if there was a God, why did he do all this to my mom and my family? And like that was a angry younger Jake. I would say that I'm now very unsure about everything. So I didn't turn to faith per se, getting my diagnosis and during my locked in, I would say I was open-minded. It was more because during that self-talk retreat that I explained, that definitely came up. I couldn't decide like what I believe in. And I know a lot of people talk about higher power. There's got to be something because I think about it a lot. Why am I the only case of survival? I know it's super rare. Like, why me? Why not the other guy? And then why did I recover to the point where I'm now working on walking and I can fully talk and do all this stuff? But it'd be weird to be like, this guy's the one and only, and now he's doing this and this, and there's no rhyme or reason or plan for that. That'd be odd too. So that's why I'm so conflicted.
I appreciate your honesty and your openness and your decision to continually explore it. As an outsider looking in on your life, I think it's evidence of a miracle. And I think it's unequivocally remarkable what you've endured and how your life has radically changed, shockingly for the better, because of a year locked down and 4 years beat up afterwards. And what you've made your life after going through the worst is stunning to me. I look at your face, and I know many of our followers are listening to our conversation, so they don't see you the way I see you today. But for our viewers on YouTube and some of the social channels, dude, they see this guy who's so alive and so alert and so aware and so stunningly handsome in his life, man. So I'm amazed by your journey. I think it is a miracle, and I'm glad that you're sharing part of that with us. For this kid, you talked earlier about the anxiety, the depression, the hole that you felt as a kid. And here you are on the other side, not only of adolescence in your early 20s, but now in your early 30s and different part in your life. That hole's been filled a little bit. The anxiety's been filled a little bit. The depression's been removed a little bit. This will be one of my final questions, but what have you learned about yourself or about life through that period of chaos?
Oh man, so much. I know a lot of people say this. If I only knew what I knew now back then, totally, 100%. What I went through in that little self-help retreat.
Dude, that is not a little self-help retreat. I've been on a couple little self-help retreats. I've led a couple little self-help retreats. 10
You
months
are
locked down ain't no little self-help retreat.
you are right. That is a long one. And also, you essentially had 18 hours a day to do the work with no distraction. But no, what I've learned is just like the way to really zoom out and think about the long road forward. And if you do X, Y, and Z now, it could deal with it now, and it could really radically change your trajectory and your outlook. But also, I guess the biggest thing I've learned now in the present is really what's important and how to cherish the time you have, right? And be in the moment, because I was really good at always thinking about the next thing in the moment, and even something that could be really fun or really exciting, like for instance, head chef, money, girlfriend, fly down to Miami and go to this restaurant. At the restaurant, which obviously I'm a foodie, order all this stuff. As I'm eating this thing that should be very exciting to me, I'm thinking about what we're doing after and tomorrow. So I was really good at that, right? And now I'm just like, what's really important and how to enjoy in the moment. And I've realized it's about what you're actually doing and the exciting stuff and what you want. It's about the people you're with and who you want to surround yourself with and spend time with and the conversation. And as someone who had no conversation for a long time, I value that so much. And what I wish for other people is that they can experience and live what I experienced without going through any nightmare's traumatic situation, because there must be a way to unlock that perspective and that shift without dealing with trauma.
Brother, where can we learn more about your story? I have a quick rapid fire questions to wrap up this podcast in a moment, but I want to make sure that the listeners who want to learn more about you can track you
Yeah,
down online. So where do they find you?
I'm certainly not too hard to find with Google nowadays. You can search Jake Handel, spelling of my last name a little unique, Haendel. Also, I'm going to be having a tell-all podcast called Blink, blinkthepodcast.com. That's releasing February 2nd, and it will be a series of one episode coming out every Sunday. I also have an accessibility startup company called Ahoy. We're kind of like Google Maps and Waze and Yelp, but personalized accessibility focused to help folks navigate to places, but also take the mystery out of accessibility, out of that wheelchair icon you see, and actually let folks will work for their specific needs. So that's AHOI or ahoymate.com, but you can find us everywhere.
Jake, we're gonna begin moving toward the finish line here in a moment. I just think it's remarkable that this man who spent months doing a life review of what could have been and a forward-looking life review of what should have been is now living into it himself. Like what a gift to have this moment. And thank you for spending this moment with us. So here we go. The Live Inspired 7. 7 questions for my new friend Jake. Begin with what's been the most impactful book you've ever read?
Oh man, that's a hard one.
Uh,
Diving Bell and the Butterfly, so that would be obviously fitting for what I went through. And obviously it's a guy pouring out his heart and soul about his experience, exactly what I went through.
to me, the reason why it not only ties to your story, but was meaningful is here's this guy who I think he was able to blink a single eye. I think out of all his entire body shut down except for the ability to move one eyelid. Through that process, working with an agent, working with some type of ghostwriter seated next to him, he blinked out word. You lived through this, Jake, letter by
Yeah.
letter, this entire book. And I to me, the book is less impressive, and that's not a knock on it, than the fact that he wrote it in the first place. Like it's just what an audacious desire to say, you know what, I'm going to spend 3 hours every day, 7 days a week for a long time, blinking out my heart. So question number 2, they get easier now. What's one positive characteristic, one positive trait that you possessed as a little boy growing up outside of Boston that you wish you exhibited as brilliantly today?
My humor.
You know what, man? I've heard your humor so clearly during our conversation. And the fact that even when you were locked in, you were still able to find humor in the misery shows me a little bit of that Boston toughness that we've all heard so much about.
Humor, grit, 100%. And I attribute that a lot to definitely my recovery. Maybe not my survival as much, but my recovery. Because maybe you've seen some of these videos of me really learning how to feed myself, and I'm like cracking up. A lot of people in recovery, they just get so frustrated because of the mess and the
Yeah.
embarrassment that they don't keep doing it, and repetition is what makes the brain relearn and get better. So the humor like kind of served me well in recovery in a lot of ways, and still does.
This next one's going to be tricky because of your situation, but I'm going to let you know ahead of time you're safe. You're going to get out of this thing safely. So here we go. If your home caught fire, and you and your family, all loved ones are safely outside, any animals you may have, but you have an opportunity of rolling back into that house, grabbing one thing that really matters to you. What's one physical thing you would come racing back outside with?
My mom's jewelry box and the painting of her, actually. Not painting, but it's like a picture frame I have of 4 pictures of her.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I go for. It would definitely be like a possession of my mom's that I would come get. Everything else, even things monetary value would be left.
Let it burn.
Let it burn, man.
That answer moves me, man. Thank you for sharing that. So I got my mom's jewelry box in my right hand and this painting, these pictures of her in my left. If you could sit on a bench on a perfect day and have a conversation with anybody living or deceased, who would you like to be seated next to?
Man, these are amazing questions. Can I give you two answers?
It's a
Okay.
big bench.
In my chef life, it'd be Anthony Bourdain
Awesome.
or Julia Child. Those two can come. But I think nowadays it'd be a philosopher of some sort. I don't know. Einstein comes to mind. I have questions for him.
So Jake, Einstein, Childs, and Bourdain are partied on this bench in Boston. Sounds like a pretty motley crew to have, man. What's the best advice that you've ever received?
I've received so much good advice. I didn't always take it. A combination of one day at a time and patience. Obviously, what I've been through, you could say I learned to have patience of a saint being stuck. But I would say also my recovery, living in the hospital and now out of the hospital, I've really learned and understood how to implement patience better. And it's still an ongoing process, but it's so important. And then just to give you another one, because my mom used to always say this, and this goes back to my earlier life, my mess ups, my faults, moderation.
Ooh.
Super
That might
important.
that might steal part of the answer from the next question, but the next question. So thank you for sharing about the importance of patience and moderation. The next one is if you could give yourself some advice at age 20. So this is a year after your mother's passing, right before this wild journey begins. What advice would you give yourself at age 20?
All those I said are fitting, but really what we are talking about earlier, just as like how to live, like value what's important and like really think about it.
I interviewed recently a friend of mine who is the president and CEO of Pilot. He leads 30,000 people in his organization. And one of the things that someone else said about him that sets him apart as a leader is his ability to prioritize what the things that matter. And I think that's exactly what you're saying. You would have wished someone would have told you at 20, man, just prioritize the things that matter.
Totally, totally.
Jake Haendel, it has been said, question number 7, that all great people can have their lives summed up in one sentence. How would you like your life to read?
Jake Candle inspired and loved. I just have so much love for life in general. So Jake Candle, one who inspired those to love.
Man, a fella who was locked in for a year and struggled for years afterwards, lived a life so vibrantly and voraciously that he inspired the rest of us to love. That's a pretty good statement. So well done. I appreciate you enduring. I appreciate you moving forward. I appreciate you learning the lessons the hard way, but applying them the right way. And I just appreciate you being with us today on the podcast.
Thank you so much. It was really a pleasure to be here.
My friends, that is the great Jake Haendel. My name is John O'Leary, and today is your day. What a gift it is. Live inspired.
I told you on the front side of the conversation with Jake that you would be inspired, you would be encouraged, you would be challenged. And I think that episode certainly lived in to that. What a difficult situation, impossible to even imagine. And for 10 months, it was his life. And yet his life today, as a result of that, is even better than his life was before that tragedy. Grab onto that truth in your life. I want you, if you were inspired by today's episode, to check out my episode I recorded a couple years ago with my buddy, Susanna Cahalan. Her life pivoted rapidly in a radically different direction, and she recounted all of this in the New York Times best-selling memoir called Brain on Fire. In that book and during her episode, Susanna bravely shares her harrowing story of being diagnosed with a rare and newly discovered neurological disease. It's a miraculous story of triumph, of faith, of love that will guide you in overcoming challenges with gratitude, with grace, with a little bit of tenacity. You can check out that episode with Susanna or just cruise on over to johnolearyinspires.com/podcast. In the show notes, I'll have a link right there so that you can check it out. It's a great one. My friends, speaking of great ones, thank you for being awesome and tuning in to our Live Inspired podcast. We don't take you for granted. You know that I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. So for this time, and until next time, my name is John O'Leary, and today is your day. What a gift it is. Live inspired.
Keeley Companies was started almost 50 years ago by the one and only Larry Keeley. What started as a small family-owned paving company in St. Louis has grown to a nationally known full-service construction, development, and restoration partner. Larry the Legend, as he is affectionately known, has been a part of this growth every step of the way and continues to provide guidance as his son Rusty, my buddy, drives their vision and achieves results on purpose. His unwavering foundation of a family culture with a focus on people has gotten Keeley Companies to where they are today, and their journey is truly just beginning. To learn more about Larry the Legend and Keeley Companies, check them out at KeeleyCompanies.com.